All right. First one up on the agenda. I was just curious, um, for my own knowledge, how the MR restructuring effort is going. I feel disconnected, but I think that's fine because that means I don't have to do anything, which also feels good. So I'm just curious how it's going and if there's anything you need help with.
There's actually nothing to report because the milestone just started yesterday. And I didn't do any design for that yesterday. But so yesterday I spent most of the time working on the beautification, just getting a bunch of MRs ready. But yes, Alexis from Plan, I don't know if you know her, she and I will be working together on these designs. We're probably going to sketch out different features or parts of the design that came from the workshop that we thought were the most interesting or the most viable. And we're meeting weekly to go through those. And then by the end, it's hard to predict because I don't know what we're going to come up with. Ideally, it would be like a full merge request page with all of the potential changes in there. It might just be pieces. It could go any number of ways. And then at the end of the milestone, we'll get them into a slightly better looking presentation, but still super low fidelity and rough. And then we'll do some internal testing. And I reached out to Ben for help with that and just kind of make sure that we're on the right track so we can just start scrapping things and building on things really quickly. And Ben came up with a few ideas on how we might test because I don't have much experience testing like these really low fidelity paper prototypes basically, and different ways that we can go about validating it. And I think Pedro might be back by then. So we'll have more hands on deck.
Well, so if just to like make sure I'm clear. So last milestone, or maybe more than last milestone, was all the like brainstorming that I saw like the canvases for, was all that. And so now we're actually moving into lo-fi designs to sort of further flesh out some of those ideas or other things that we've been thinking about and validate those. And then, so design only this milestone, validation next milestone, and then sort of like repeat that based on, see where that gets us at the end of feedback, I think is probably, okay.
Yeah, I find it really hard to plan because I still don't know. There's so many unknowns. I have no idea what it's going to look like at the end of this. But yeah, the last milestone we were focusing on narrowing down to 3, I think we came up with hypotheses. So we're going to design around those hypotheses. And if at the end of the milestone, like nothing good comes out of it, then which won't happen. But if we can't come like to any good kind of solution, then we'll know that our hypotheses are probably not right. And we'll have to go back and kind of look at those again. I don't think that's the case.
Okay.
So I think we're good.
I just pasted a link. Is that the epic to track? I think so. And then it's really like that issue underneath there.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay. Thanks for the update. I appreciate it. I realized I hadn't asked about it until I started pinging you and Pedro on that issue last milestone. And I was like, I guess I should know maybe a little bit more what's going on. So thank you for the update.
Sure.
Next one, I'm sort of pulse checking like how Pedro and I had talked about this before he went out, and so I'm sort of pulse checking you on how you feel or what you think we need to do about the icon for attention requests. Like, should we change it? Do we even care? Loaded question, I know, but
it is. It's hard to answer this one too. So I talked with Marcel about this yesterday in our one-on-one, and I don't think he got around to posting what he was thinking, or maybe he didn't want to influence it too much. But yes, I think we should change it just because it looks like a chevron, and I know it's not, and people will learn that it's not, but it's a little odd having something that we use all over the app and all over the web. To use it something like that for a different purpose is a little wrong almost. So yeah, I think we should update it, especially because we created that issue. We did all this exploration and people are, following it, and to just be like, yeah, we're not gonna, feels a little bit, I don't know, just because we can't come up with something I feel like there is something to come up with. I just don't know what that is yet. And then as for the current proposals, it sounded like the bell was a somewhat popular option. And there's a lightning bolt that means nothing. It's just not used yet. And then like the Garrett style, I keep calling it a chevron, and I don't want to, but like it is. It's thicker though, and it looks a little bit better. So maybe that's the smallest iteration. Just because it's already used somewhere else, it might be like a little bit validated for us because it's already used. The thing is, users didn't seem to understand that it was responsibility passing versus notifying. So the bell might work based on users' perceived functionality of this feature. In that we're kind of generating a to-do for them in a way. We're not, but it kind of feels that way. So the bell might make sense to them if they perceive that feature to be doing that, then the bell's great. We're already using the bell in the UI in 2 different places as far as we can see. So maybe it's not good, but maybe it is good because they'll tie the 2 together in some way. I don't know yet. The passing responsibility didn't seem to come across with any of those icons, and I'm not sure that there is an icon that can display that, which I think is fine. Not every icon needs to tell a full story. But I'm still leaning towards the thicker chevron just because. Is there a risk to waiting on changing the icon in any meaningful way? You mean enabling the feature with the existing icon?
I think yeah, we can go with enabling it. That's fine. Yeah, like what if we, I think the feedback we got from people who use the feature was sort of like they expected it to be a drop down, which like I too close to the feature can't associate, can't understand, like that doesn't resonate with me. But I could see that if you were sort of first approaching it. So, but we didn't really get feedback on like, I didn't understand the feature. It's sort of like once you got through the initial hurdle of it's not a drop down, it didn't really matter anymore, like sort of what the icon was. And so I wonder if we're like over rotating on the icon. And like, if we let this ride for a couple milestones, we'll have a better source of feedback or a better understanding to like draw a different icon conclusion. And like, if we should just leave it alone entirely for now, or is the risk if we launch with this icon, changing it in 3 or 4 months is like significantly harder because we're going to make people retrain on a new icon.
I would prefer, yeah, I prefer to do it now for a few reasons. So the chevron thing, that's why I think that the slightly thicker chevron might be a good just fix because it won't look as chevron-y. It's already used by a feature, or it's already used by a different product, and it sort of conveys what we're trying to convey. It's almost like an arrow, but not too much, and it looks clickable. I thought it looked pretty clickable. We can update it to put a little plus if we need to on the sidebar. It's hard because I still don't really understand the feature. I understand what it does. I still don't know what problem it's solving that a different type of code review product within our code review stage would solve. And by that, I mean, I'm broken record about creating like a review experience. That seems to solve, in my mind, I can't figure out what gap it's missing, I guess. Every time I think about it, I think it'll solve everything that attention requests is doing because we already have to-dos and then we'll have this review experience, and together they're doing something that attention request is doing, but without adding that additional feature and the additional sort of clutter to the sidebar and the additional documentation and the additional features that have to be added onto that. So in my mind, I'm hoping that if we ever do kind of focus on the review portion, then that will eventually kind of negate the need for attention requests at all. So it's hard for me to think like, let's plan on in a few milestones updating the icon or something like that, just because I feel still that I don't want to say on board. That's not it. I feel like I don't totally understand the purpose of attention requests, down from the name to the icon to the functionality.
I do. I want it back.
What?
I do. And I can explain why I want it back so badly.
Great.
Release post items. One of the things that we have to do as part of getting one ready to go for, say, the 15.0 release, it's got to be signed off on by several different people, usually PM, EM, technical writer, sometimes even the engineer who wrote the feature. The custom of taking out reviewers from after you've looked at a particular merge request means anytime that I am handed a release post item, I have to play the game. Okay, did everybody actually see this? Or have we forgotten to bring in some of the people that we need? Because the names are just not there. And with the attention requests, all of the people who are involved remain visible in the sidebar. And I don't have to go spelunking in what can sometimes be a really long merge request to figure out, okay, did Kai see this? Did the engineer who wrote this see this? Does that help at all?
Yeah, and we got that feedback too from internal, like, yeah, the research I was doing, people were like, okay, I'm the maintainer who's reviewed it. Let me go through the widget, the sidebar, the comments. And again, since I have no designs and I'm just blabbering on, this would solve that too. Like if you review people, if you ask, 3 people for a review, they would remain in the sidebar. There would just be some other kind of interaction that solved it without adding a new feature called attention requests. It would be, yeah, it would be similar. The removing and everything, I don't think works for anyone. So yeah, I definitely understand the problem.
Okay.
I suppose I guess I don't, it's not that I don't understand the solution. I just wonder if there's another way to solve it. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are many ways to solve it. Yeah. And this is one of them.
And that's where I become useless and step away. So cool. Step 1, know what you're not good at. Front end. Oh yeah.
Okay, so I feel like if we're going to do this, we need to if those icons don't exist, like I don't know if the big chevron exists in like our SVG library, if that's what we're going to use. And this is what we're going to call it, the big chevron. I don't have a better name for it now either, thanks.
We can't call it a chevron. It's got to be like an arrow.
The big arrow.
It does not exist. So yes, if whichever one we choose for, let's just pick one, whichever one we choose. I think either Pedro already has it it's in Figma, those options that he put, they just might need to be kind of finessed a little bit. And that's where I'm useless at that. So that's where Jeremy can help, and he's really quick at it, and it's already there. He can help with that, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I guess the question is, do we know if Jeremy has capacity to clean that one up and
for him, I think it would take no time at all, I think.
Okay. Then can we, I did see Marcel's feedback. He put it in the design on Pedro's design last night or this morning. Oh. It was still he likes the bell. I don't like the bell. Um,
I kind of like the bell.
I have this weird, like, I wrote this in a comment, it wasn't fleshed out. The bell to me feels this like very in my, like, knowing what the feature is and that it's like request attention, I associate it with like I walk into a hotel and I like slam the bell at like a concierge desk, and like I am asking someone to do something for me because they are like a servant of mine in that sense, not like a peer, is sort of like how I sort of like went through like this mental piece in the bell. And I think the bell oversimplifies and sort of gives the wrong impression of the feature. Like I think we might give the wrong mental model for people if we associate it as a notification device, and not as like a workflow. Like I think the bell like would train you to think that you're giving a notification, not that you're doing anything else. And not that the arrow is better necessarily, but the arrow doesn't come with like loaded preconceived context about like what you're doing, if that makes sense. Like you don't necessarily, like if you click a bell, you expect that you've notified someone, and like I think your mental train of thought stops there. If you click the arrow, you will recognize based on what the feature does that you've notified someone, but like you also end up with sort of this indicator, and that might open minds and workflows a little bit more than like the limiting piece of the bell.
Yes. And I agree. And I think that's exactly the point that I think Marcel was trying to make, and that, yeah, we prefer them to think of it, the mental model to be, you know, this is the person who's responsible right now. The arrow is pointing at them, like you need to do something. But the name attention request, even like you said, that hotel thing, we're calling it attention request, which says, give me attention, not please fix this for me. Like
we originally called it waiting for, was the original name when we started like talking about it. And it was very hard to communicate that like in language. And I think that's why we like then shifted the way we spoke about it and started calling it attention request. They are sort of different. Like it could be interesting to revisit that language. I think it's maybe a little late to revisit the language choice, but we originally started talking about them as waiting for. So it was like waiting for Annabelle to do something, waiting for Kai to do something, versus like I'm requesting Annabelle's attention to do something, which feels somewhat different.
Yeah, I get there's, yeah, it's very complicated. There's really no good answer, but
Yeah.
attention still sounds like notify, like,
Yeah,
to me.
I think that's fair.
So the bell works. And Amy, why do you like the bell icon?
It feels more tied to what I'm attempting to do rather than the thing that is not a chevron. I'm terrible at explaining this stuff.
I guess one of my worries about using the bell too is that people will be like, okay, so this is a notification. How does it work with our other notifications or to-dos? How is this different? But in my mind, it isn't different because you are notifying someone, right? Like, I don't know. This is where I every time I'm like, let's do this. And then I step back and think, hang on, whoa. There are just so many like questions, so many cases.
Yeah, I don't think it's, I think you are butting into like not a complete review, and I think I would agree. I think it feels like it's a huge step because it was so many months of design and engineering and all these things, and so it feels like a very big thing. And I think in reality, it's like a much smaller thing about something that we're still like trying to figure out how to work our way through, like of a complete review process. And so I think maybe we're unduly giving it more pressure or weight than it sort of needs. Like we should probably, that's why I'm curious, like the icon thing in general feels like a significant amount of bike shedding at this point. Like, and so I think we should move on from it. With that being said, I think if we're going to do the big, not chevron, pointy arrow thing, maybe we just call it the not chevron. That could be a good icon. Can you make that decision today in the issue and then see if Jeremy has the capacity to get it? Because we will need to then adjust what's on someone in front end's plate to make updates. Because I'd love to say it's just an icon change, but it actually involves changing all of the tooltips and all of the docs once that SVG actually finally hits the SVG library that then gets updated in GitLab. So like it is a like lengthy and long change. And so the more lead time we have, the better.
Yep, I will post something today. So let's move on from that.
Yeah, and the last one, the most complicated issue in the world. So I just want to make it easy is the code owner ones. Easy, I say I want to make it easy. I'm going to just explain where I had been at on this with both of you, because I think Annabelle and I talked about it, and I think we get closer with these. And so I think maybe getting Amy with these to clear up the language and a verbal explanation will help.
You should reload the page because I left you something a couple hours ago.
Yeah, you left a comment here.
Uh-huh.
I don't think either one of these is correct, and so that's why I'm gonna just start at this.
Gotcha.
I think so. The intent of the feature, or the intent of the way Martin had written it and the way I had understood it, especially in the context of the epic, the way approval resets work now. And so that's all that exists today in the product is remove approvals when commits are added to the source branch. So that's a feature that exists today. And what that feature does is it resets all approvals, code owners, regular approval rules, anything. Anytime anything is changed on the branch, you rebase it, resets the approvals. You change a docs file, resets approvals for docs, front end, back end, whatever your approval rules are. And so the intent of this issue, and in the context of this, is that that setting makes it really hard to actually use that setting, because it creates these situations that are very high friction for teams with large sets of approvals. It's even already causing friction for GitLab because we've recently turned on some new approvals, and like you change something and like you've got to go find these specialized group of people that can actually approve this one section of the code base. And so we reworked some of this. I had reworked some of this because there was another customer that was interested in contributing specifically around like rebases and merging, which don't actually typically change the content of a merge request, but reset approvals for no like good reason. So like if you're in a fast forward merge situation, you rebase your branch and you lose all your approvals, you got to go get all your approvals again. And then you've got to like rebase again because you've now fallen behind, and then you lose all, like you're just this circular thing. So they can't use it. So that was where we started. This one was specific to code owners, and the ask around code owners has been, if I have a rule that says file A is approved by Annabelle and file B is approved by Amy, and both of those are in a merge request, once I've gotten both their approvals, if I then change file B, only Amy should have to reapprove. Like we shouldn't go back and ask Annabelle to reapprove something that hasn't changed. Like that doesn't make sense. And so I think I like had used the wording down here, like selective. We need like a term for how we're going to phrase these code owner pieces. But the idea is that I had is as a sub option of this feature. So when you're using this feature, there were sort of two options. One, we could have just made this the native behavior of this setting and like gone to like a smarter code owner approval reset. Annabelle quickly pointed out that we'd probably need a setting, and I sent her, appropriate GIFs. And so the idea of adding a setting is so that the default behavior would be, we would use a smarter code owner approval reset. So like if you turn on this first setting, which just removes all approvals, we would use by default what is phrased in here, selective code owner resets. And so that would be the way where we only reset the things that have changed. I think selective needs better wordsmithing is probably the answer. And then a docs link. And I think that's what we tried to do here, is like spell out the difference between these two behaviors here. But the idea is that as a sub option of this one, we somehow have a way to communicate that like the behavior is a subset of code owner approvals would change, or like would be reset, but not all, unless you changed all of the files that were part of code owner resets.
What if we just said only reset approvals on changed files? Is that too simplistic? And then unpack that we use the code owner feature in the docs?
I think you need to be specific that it's code owner, because otherwise like the other approvals, it'd be hard to distinguish, because code owner approvals are very file specific. The other ones are not. So it might be hard to distinguish that we're talking about code owner approval rules versus others. Would be my short assumption there.
The reason I liked the checkbox with the 2 radio buttons, and that's why I uploaded that, and that's one that Amy also changed the wording for, is just because I didn't like that it was like reset all approvals and then sub, oh wait, don't reset all of them. I liked that it was like, do you want to reset some? Okay, yes. Now, what do you want to reset? All or all but unchanged? Kind of. I just felt like it makes more sense seeing it that way. If that makes sense. But the wording does get really clunky that way.
Yeah, this one's hard.
I hate adding settings. Why are we getting so many settings issues?
I don't know. And I'll also say this is, I told this to Annabelle, and so Amy, for your reference, I don't think we will build this feature, which is why we have to be more explicit. There's a TAM that has asked because a customer is interested in contributing. It was the only reason we're sort of trying to prep and figure out what this looks like. So by the wording needs to be more accurate, or the settings need to be more explicit than we would do if we were necessarily picking this up. So we'll get less chances to wordsmith in an MR than we will in here.
Not all tech writers do this like I do.
Yeah, hopefully that gives additional context. We don't have to solve it now, but that gives additional context for that one, so we can go back and figure that out. Hopefully it cleans it up for you, Amy, and makes it more clear what we're trying to solve for.
I left an idea in the agenda. I can drop it into the issue merge request, because I will forget.
And then we're at time, and I've gotta stop. I did see Carrie's piece.
Doesn't have to be addressed today. We're at time.
Yeah. Can of worms. I agree.
Oh,
Maybe something we could spend some time on. It could be a very interesting like project to spend some time on, like making better email notifications in general, but figure out how to work that.
That came up because of the community merge request, Annabelle, that you and I have been sitting on, that I looked at it and said, nobody's touched this file in 9 years.
I think that's why our
It must
notifications look the way they do.
It must be working, sort of.
This is fine. On that note, I have stand up for 15:0. I gotta go.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Bye.
Annabelle. Bye.